I want to emphasize the positive. Look how much better off we are in terms of working together than we sometimes have been in the past. The Speaker and I have been very clear that we're not going to balance this budget with broad-based taxes. We have resisted calls for raising the income taxes, the sales tax, the rooms and meals, broadening the sales tax. We've heard about candy. We've heard about plastic bags. You know, the list goes on and on. And we have kept our promise of trying to balance this budget with new ideas, not new taxes. Broad-based taxes have been off the table.
Do you agree with that, Governor?
We've talked a lot over the last couple of years about the tax burden Vermonters are facing, and to be honest, I don't see much relief on the property tax front. Just over this past weekend, I talked with two families in different parts of the state who are leaving Vermont because of the high burden of the property tax, and we need to take that seriously. We need school funding reform, and I don't see a lot of movement during the current session. We raised broad-based taxes last year with the income tax capital gains component going up, and we've got to recognize that this makes a difference to people as to what their decisions are. So I'm going to keep urging the legislature to avoid any tax increase in this difficult fiscal and economic environment and roll back some that we have.
This may be a question for the commissioner, but is there any potential problem with the federal government with these changes, with the expanded?
We don't believe so. As with any changes to our unemployment insurance statute, the U.S. Department of Labor has to review to make sure we remain in compliance. But we've been checking with them pretty frequently throughout the last year and a half about our proposals. So we think we're in good shape in our ability to change everything that is slated to be changed.
What did they kind of put out of bounds in terms of changes? Were there specific proposals that you considered, or ideas you considered that they said no to?
They're concerned about the potential fee on reimbursable employers. That's not an element of this bill. That is the one factor that was of concern. Not to say that we couldn't do it, and Senator Luzzi's bill clearly included that, but that we would have to be careful about how it was figured and how it was calculated.
I'm not as up on this as my colleague Pete. But what was that fee on which employers?
Reimbursable employers, I'm sorry.
Those are
Government
negative
and,
balance, or?
No, government and nonprofit, certain nonprofit employers that presently do not pay into the fund. So that was the only element that we heard concern from the review of S-290, which was really the bill, and I also want to thank Senator Luzzi and his committee for taking leadership on that. They were really the catalyst that held all of our feet to the fire to really keep pushing this. And we took S-290 and ran that by the U.S. Department of Labor, and that was the only element they showed some concern. Not that we couldn't do it, but just how we would collect it. But that is off the table, which is ultimately okay.
Does this do anything to negative balance employers?
It will, in fact, reduce the number of negative balance employers, and again, to avoid a little UI jargonese, but our PhDs in UI understand this at this point, but those are employers that we pay out more in benefits than they pay in taxes. This will reduce the number of negative balance employers because the taxable wage base will be increasing. So the income will grow and the expenses will drop by virtue of certain benefit adjustments that are being made. So yes, it will reduce the number of negative.
Nothing specific to that?
Nothing specific, no.
And what's just the total number that, the state's going to have to borrow, Commissioner, until the fund is brought back into balance?
This will reduce the total number to approximately $133 million at the highest end of borrowing.
For 5 years?
Right. And then we'll slowly pay that off and start to replenish the fund balance as the Speaker and the Governor have spoken.
And where are you at now?
We're rated now about $58 million.
And how much of that will be interest that we have to pay back? Because we only have the grace period for the year, right?
We have a grace period through all of calendar 2010. The interest number is not popping right in my head, but I can get that for you after.
On Friday, you had said that their package didn't have the long-term issues that you wanted to address. What does this have that addresses that?
Well, as the Governor mentioned, there is a provision, what we call variable duration. It really impacts the total duration of benefits that a UI claimant can receive, and it's based on a percentage of their wages they earned while working. So it will address the person who works 6 months and collects unemployment for 6 months. So That's a substantial impact. The 1 week waiting period is also an impact in terms of requiring that folks wait a week to apply for unemployment. There is some part-time wages disregard that's also a feature, and then the misconduct provisions are also a feature of the long-term revisions that really help bring the balance about.
When do the taxable wage base increases go into effect?
The first increase will go into effect January 1, 2011, where we'll go from the current 10 to 13,000. And then on January 1, 2012, it will go from 13 to 16,000. And then it will stop at 16,000 and then reduce by a couple $1,000s at 2 other trigger points.
But there's nothing to base it on the long term on inflation?
Yes, there is
or-
a provision to index the increases in taxable wage base as we index the increases in the maximum weekly benefit. And that goes to the earlier question about long-term fixes. How do we avoid, we get back here again, by indexing those two factors together, we'll have growth in income and growth in expenses occurring at the same rate. And once we're replenished and back into the black. So that should avoid us ever being back here. The states that have a similar structure as ours are not borrowing because of that indexing factor.
Is there a sunset for the worker provisions as well?
There's a sunset on the 1 week waiting period that occurs in 2017 or whenever the fund is in the black, whichever is later. So yes, that will go away.
Is that the same trigger as the reduction in taxable wage base?
The reduction in taxable wage base is later. It's tied to tax rate schedule 3, which again, to avoid UI jargon, means when the fund is back to a healthy enough place, when we've reached the sort of perfect ideal balance of income to expenses is when the tax rate schedules are at schedule 3. That will be sometime in the future, hard to project exactly when at this point, but that's when the first trigger of taxable wage base reduced by $2,000 occurs. The second is at tax rate schedule 1, which is a very long time away and arguably maybe never achieved, because that's when there's actually too much in taxable income coming in. So hopefully we get to 3 and live there, if you